We're on Daf Nun Dalid Amid Beis, approximately 10 lines down from the top. The Mishnah says, Ein Mosifin al Arboim Ushmona Tekios B'Yom Echad. So the max is 48 tekios, and that means when we have a set of a trua with a tekiah before and a tekiah after, and the blowing of the chatzotot, we count that as 3. And if we calculate that one calendar date in the entire year that has the maximum number of tkiyas will reach the number 48. So the Gemara asks below, is that really true? Va'ika, I have a day in which we would blow more than 48 tkiyos, and that's Erev Pesach, Shechalios B'Shabbos. And what happens is that on Erev Pesach, they would come in 3 kitots, 3 groups. Each group would read the Hallel 3 times over. And there's a machlokas between Rabbi Yehuda and the Chachamim in the Succah in Psachim about the 3rd kat. And according to Rabbi Yehuda, and we quoted him earlier on this Amud, the kat shlishis of the Makrivei Korban Pesach would read Hallel only 1 time. So therefore, there were only 3 tekiyos at the beginning of the Hallel of the 3rd kat. So the Gemara says the following: the Rabbi Yehuda, according to Rabbi Yehuda, when they blew on Erev Pesach, Yos B'Shabbos, is they blew Chamshin V'Chada, 51 tekiyos, 21 tekiyos that's standard for every day of the year. An additional 9 tekiyos for Musaf at Shabbos, and the Shabbos Musaf requires another 9 tekiyos, so we get to the number 30 tekiyos. And then, when we have Hallel of the 2 kitos or rishonos, that will give us 18, 9 times 2. And then, with regard to the 3rd category of Yehuda, we have another 3 tekiyos, and you calculate it. When you add 21 to 9, you get 30. 30 to 9 is 39. And then you add the 18 plus the 3 is 21 and 39, you get to 51. The Ilu Rabbanan, according to the Shita of the Chachamim, that even the kat shlishis would read the Hal 3 times, and therefore they blow 9 tekiyos. Then we have 9 times 3 is 27. Plus, we have the 9 of Musaf, and we have the 21 of a standard. So it comes out Chamishim V'Sheva. We have 57 years. In other words, it comes out according to both Rabbi Yehuda and the Chachamim, we've tapped beyond the max of 48 years. So the Gemara answers, Kiktani Midi the Isi B'Chol talking about days that must be on every calendar year. But Erev Pesach, Shalios B'Shabbos, the Leiseg, Shana B'Shana Lo Ketani, that particular case of an overlap of Erev Pesach and Shabbos could happen, but it doesn't have to happen. And therefore, it's not listed in the Mishnah. So again, it's really true, and it's undeniable that Erev Pesach, Shalios B'Shabbos, there are more than 48 kilos. However, that's not counted in our Mishnah because there's no hechrech. It's not definite that such a day will happen within a calendar year. So the Gemara says, wait a second, I have an objection to that answer. How can you tell me that the Mishnah only enumerates kios that for sure will be blown each year, or to Erev Shabbos, Shebesochah? The Mishnah mentions 48 kilos on a Friday that falls in the middle of Succah. And mi isa b'chol shana. Is it really so that every single calendar year will have a Friday which falls in the middle of Succah? It's quite possible that you won't find this 48 kilos. Why? the Erev Shabbos, the first day of Sukkot, falls on a Friday, we're not going to blow on Yontif the 12 kios that we blow for Nisach HaMayim. And as we discussed, the Nisach HaMayim kios do not override the Shabbos. So therefore, on a year where Yontif falls on a Friday, then they would only blow, all told, 36 kios. So the Gemara answers, you know what? It's impossible for the first day of Yontif of Sukkot to fall on a Friday. It won't happen. Why? If the Bezdin will anticipate that the first day of Yontif is going to coincide with a Friday, then Mitchei Dachile, Bezdin will guarantee that they push off the first day of Sukkot by one day, meaning that it should fall not on a Friday, but rather the next day on Shabbos. How would they achieve that goal? They would be Ma'aber Chodesh El. And by making Chodesh El instead of a 29-day month, a 30-day month, they would postpone, push off Sukkot from Friday to Shabbos. And the Gemara is going to ask why they did so. El Chatchila, you don't make El Ma'ubar because that's going to make it problems with Bnei Agola, and they won't make Rosh Hashanah in its time. That's a sugi in Rosh Hashanah Daf Yutes. But Ma'abrim Chodesh Acher Kodem El Kidei She'el Lo Yehei Ma'ubar. But in any event, they would add a 30th day to make the Chodesh Ma'ubar to guarantee that Sukkot, the first day Sukkot, is pushed off from a Friday to a Sunday. My timer. Evan de Ikla. Ikla means Kishechal. Yontif Rishon Shel Chad. Lios Berev Shabbos. If the first day of Sukkot, which is the 15th day of Tishrei, would fall on a Friday, then by definition, Yom Kippurim, which is always 5 days early on the 10th of Tishrei, Emas Havi, when would it fall? That's a rhetorical question. The Chad Shabbos, on Sunday. So that by beginning Sukkot on a Friday, you are punching the clock such that there's no question about it. Yom Kippur would have to fall on a Sunday. And from Sunday, which is the 10th, you arrive on the 15th on a Friday. Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And if that be the case, we want to avoid Yom Kippurim falling on a Sunday. And why is it that Beis Din doesn't want Yom Kippur on a Sunday? What's the problem with Shabbos and then Sunday, meaning Shabbos, and then going into Yom Kippur on Sunday? And that's a Gemara Rosh Hashanah Daf Chav. And the Gemara establishes that there are two reasons why we don't want this period of 2 consecutive days of Shabbos and Yom, 48 hours of Isur Malach. One is because of the Yerakos. We want to guarantee that the Yerakos will be fresh. Now, imagine if Yom Kippur is on a Friday, then you'll have by Shabbos Yerakos that are no longer fresh. Kmushin. Kmushin means they'll begin to disintegrate. Another reason is because if we have 2 days consecutively, then we have a problem of a mess. If somebody dies and you have 2 full days of Isur Malacha, going from Friday, Shabbos to Sunday, whenever Yom Kippur falls, either on Friday or Sunday, then you won't be able to bury the mess for 48 hours. And then there'll be sirachon of the mess. That's not a covered mess. Therefore, we're going to push off Yom Kippur from Sunday to Monday. And how do we do that? By being ma'aber. We discuss which month, but let's say we be ma'aber Chodesh El. And as a result of being Ma'aber Chodesh El, the first day of Sukkot would be pushed from Friday to Shabbos. So we'll never have a situation where the first day of Sukkot is on a Friday. It just can't happen. So the Gemara says, is that really so? Are you telling me that it's absolutely impossible for Yom Kippur to be Chal next to Shabbos, meaning either before Shabbos on a Friday or after Shabbos on a Sunday? But Tanan, I'm going to bring to you two proofs that in fact Yom Kippur could fall on a Shabbos. The first is from a Mishnah in Shabbos Daf Kuf Yud Gimel. Elvei Shabbos, craving the Yom Kippurim. On Shabbos, they shechted the carbon tumid shel bein arbaim. They did this Rika Sadam, and they haven't yet done the Haktorah Seiburim. That can be done the following night. In this case, it's Motzei Shabbos, which is Yom Kippur, and we're permitted to do so. But we see clearly that you could have Yom Kippur on a Sunday, on Motzei Shabbos. Right here, the carbon tumid shekrivu bein arbaim ayumaktirin esei farav v'chalava b'layla kimavur b'mishnah Shabbos. Elvei Shabbos craving Yom Kippurim kishachal Yom Kippurim b'motzai Shabbos. If on the other hand Yom Kippurim is on a Friday, then Rabbi Shmuel says we don't burn the chelvei Yom Kippurim on Shabbos. And Rabbi Akiva disagrees with Rabbi Shmuel, and he holds that Ein Chelvei Shabbos craving Yom Kippurim, the Lo Shel Yom Kippurim b'Shabbos. In any event, we see clearly from this Mishnah that Yom Kippurim can fall on a Sunday. Now, the Gemara quotes a Brisa as further proof that you could have Yom Kippurim that's right next to Shabbos, contiguous to Shabbos. Rav Zera ki Avina Bei Rav Bavel. When I was studying the Beis Medrash of Rav in Bavel, before I came to Eretz Yisrael on Aliyah, Avi Amri, they would say there in Bavel, Adesanya, what we found in a Brisa that Yom Kippurim Shechalios Erev Shabbos, and again, if Yom Kippurim is on a Friday, we're talking about 2 consecutive days of Kiddush Hayom and Isa Malacha, Friday and Saturday. Loyu Tokim. They didn't blow the 6th kios before Shabbos. Now, remember that we discussed that on Erev Shabbos, every Erev Shabbos, they would blow 6 kios. The first 3 was for the purpose of libatel bimalach, that the farmers out in the fields should cease their malach and start coming back home into the city for Shabbos. And then the second set was right when it was time for Shabbos, and it declared that there's an Isser Malach. Now, in this case, Yom Kippurim is on a Friday, and everyone's already desisting from Malacha by virtue of the fact that Yom Kippurim is Asur b'Malacha. So it has the same Kedusha Shabbos, Yom Kippur, it's Asur b'Malacha, and Yom Kippur Motzai Shabbos. If Yom Kippur is on a Sunday, it starts with Motzai Shabbos. Lo Yumav Dilim. Normally, when a Yontif is on a Sunday, then on that Saturday night we recite Abdullah Baruch Hamavdil Bein Kodesh L'Kodesh. That's because we're going from one level of Kedusha Kamur of Shabbos, into a Kedusha Kala, because Yom Kippurim Meleches Al Nefesh is mutter. But in the case of going from Shabbos into Yom Kippurim, we don't recite out. We don't say Baruch Hamal Bein Kodesh L'Kodesh, because the kedusha of Yom Kippurim is a day, is Chomer Kishabbos. It has all the Isuri Malach. There's a discussion about this in Minitziv, but let's assume that there are all the Isuri Malach. That's why there was a minig actually in Lita that Rav Soloveitchik used to tell us about, and on Yom Kippurim they used to wish each other a good Shabbos or a good Sabbath, because Yom Kippurim is Chomer Kishabbos. And therefore you can't say Baruch Hamavta Bein Kodesh L'Kodesh. In any event, we see clearly that this Brisa maintains that you could have Yom Kippur fall on a Friday or on a Sunday. And in Bavel used to say about this brisa, divrei kolbi. Everybody concedes to this halacha of the brisa. We'll see later on what that means. He salikis lahasa. And now Rabbi Zera continues with his testimony. And he says that when I got to Eretz Yisrael after I made Aliyah, Ashkechas, the Rabbi Yehuda, brother of Shimon Pazi, I found Rabbi Yehuda and the Yosef Komar, and he was saying about this brisa that we don't blow on Yom Kippurim of Erev Shabbos. Rabbi Akiva, that brisa reflects the shita of Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva is of the opinion in the Mishnah in Shabbos, which we're going to quote momentarily, that Chel Bei Shabbos Einam Kravim B'Yom Kippurim, and Chel B'Yom Kippurim, the flip side, are not craving the Shabbos. The Shitasa, according to Rabbi Akiva, Yom Kippurim has the same chumrah as Shabbos, and therefore, if Yom Kippurim is on Friday, we're not going to blow the tkiyos that we normally do to be mavdil someone from Kodesh, from Malacha, from Chol to Kodesh, because Yom Kippurim itself is vested with the same level of Kedusha and the Chumras HaKedusha of Shabbos. So Yom Kippurim and Shabbos are equal. But according to Rabbi Shmuel, who disagrees with Rabbi Akiva in that Mishnah, holds that Chel Bei Shabbos created the Yom Kippurim, which means that Yom Kippurim is kal vis-a-vis Shabbos. Then we have to blow on Yom Kippurim Shechal B'Erev Shabbos in order to notify the Kohanim that the Kedusha of Yom Kippurim is less severe, it's more lenient than Shabbos. And then the Kohanim would understand that they cannot be makriv Chel Bei Yom Kippurim on Shabbos, which means if Yom Kippurim is on a Friday and the Chel Bei Korban Tamid were not burnt on the Mizbeach on Yom Kippur. Now we're entering into Motzei Yom Kippur, which is Leil Shabbos. We cannot, and we are not permitted to be maktir those Chelvei Yom Kippur, because according to Rabbi Shmuel, Yom Kippurim, although all the 39 malachas are awesome, but you're going down one level. And then the minhag was on Yom Kippur to say good yod. In any event, we see clearly from this price that Yom Kippur could be chal on Sunday, and if Yom Kippur is going to be on Sunday, then Yom Tov Rishon Shel Sukkos could be chal on Erev Shabbos. If that be the case, we're back to ask our question: why doesn't the Tana mention Erev Pesach Shchalios B'Shabbos, even though it doesn't apply on every single year? And you cannot guarantee that within any calendar year there'll be an Erev Pesach on Shabbos, but nevertheless, Erev Shabbos, B'tochacha, in the middle of Yom Tov, which is listed, enumerated in our Mishnah, will not necessarily happen on each year. So that day, where we blow the max of 48 kilos, which is called Erev Shabbos, B'tochacha, there's no hechrik that'll happen within the course of a year. Because it's possible that Yom Tov Rishon will be on Erev Shabbos, and then they will blow less tkiyos. Lo kash. Gemara now introduces a machlokas between the Rabbanon and Acherim. Our Mishnah that reflects the shita that it's impossible for Yom Kippurim and Shabbos to be two consecutive days, 48 hours of Kedusha, meaning Yom Kippurim on either a Friday or a Sunday. That's Rabbanon. The Rabbanon of the opinion that whenever there's a need to, we will be ma'aber the chodesh. That's called ma'aber es ha-chodesh l'tzorah. And since Beis Din doesn't want 2 days consecutive of Kiddush Hayom, either because of the Yerokos problem, or alternatively because of the burial issue in a Misa case, then they will be ma'aber es el. They have no inhibitions about doing so. And therefore, the conclusion is you'll never have Yom Kippur neither on a Friday or on a Sunday, and Beis Din will guarantee that won't happen. Again, in our calendar, it won't happen because of the principle that was established by Hillel, the Nasi, of Lo Adu Rosh. But maybe we'll talk about that a little bit later. But the mission of the Bryce that you quoted, that Yom Kippurim could be Chal, Samach L'Shabbos, on a Friday or on a Sunday, Chelbe Yom Kippur is Chelbe Shabbos, craving the Yom Kippurim, and the Bryce with regard to the tkiyas, the 6 tkiyas of Shabbos, which are omitted if Yom Kippur is Friday, those reflect the Shita of Acherim. The Acherim are of the opinion that every single month is either Molei or Chaser in that sequence. And we're not going to change that. If a month is Chaser, the next month will be Molei, the next month will be Chaser, the next month will be Molei. And Tamid, it's always Chodesh Echad Molei, the Chodesh Achar Ka, Chaser. And we don't have the principle with the Acherim that Ma'avim es HaChodesh L'Tzorah. It's an absolute rule, signed and engraved in stone, that the month is either Chaser or Molech. We went to the Brisa. This Brisa is going to record the Shita of Acherim Omrim Ein Bein Atzeres Teres Chagat Shvuos. In 1 year, Latzeres the next year, Ein Bein Rosh Hashanah of 1 year to Rosh Hashanah the next year, Ela Arba Yomim Bilvad. It will always be that when we go from 1 year to the next, we add 4 days. And we'll try to figure out the calculation. So again, Yontif on the following year will always be 4 days in the week later than the Yontif on the previous year. For example, if let's say that Yontif in this year is on a Sunday, then you add 4 days, and that same Yontif a year later will be on a Thursday, on Yom Hamishi, because we added 4 days. Because again, the Achirim of the opinion that Li'olam, always, the Seder Chadashim is Echad Molei, a 30-day month, the Echad Chaser, a 29-day month. And we're not going to be Ma'aber the Chodesh with Sorah. And we're not going to take, for example, a Chodesh that's Chaser and add a day of making it to Molech. That can't be, even though there's a Tzorah. Now, therefore, every 2 months will be equal to 59 days. That means a molad is 29 and a half days. And if you add another molad, 2 months, then you have 29 and a half times 2, which is equal to 59. Correct? If you want to do it the other way around, you could call it 60 minus 1, if you follow it. I mean, it's 30 and 30 minus 1, because it's really 29.5 and 29.5. So what that means is that on every single year, according to this sheet of the Acherim, there'll be 6 months of 59 days. Okay? Now, if you multiply 6 by 51, you'll do the math. That comes up when you double it, you have 180. And then you add to the 180, 174. So you get Shlosh Me'os Chamishim V'Arba Yom, 354 days. So that means we have 50 months plus another 4 days. And therefore, we need to make up that difference of the 4 days. We're going to add the 4 days to the 50 weeks of the year. And therefore, the Chag will always fall out next year 4 days. So we have 180 plus 174 is 354, which means 350 plus 4. We're going to have to add those 4 days. So, for example, if Rosh Hashanah is on a Sunday, the next year, in the following year, Rosh Hashanah will be on a Thursday. If let's say they added an extra Chodesh Adar, then the difference between Rosh Hashanah of one year and Rosh Hashanah the next year will be Chamisha Yom. Why? Because a Chodesh Ubar, meaning an additional month, which is called Adar Sheni, is always 29 days, which means it's going to be 4 weeks plus 1 extra day. And we're going to have to add this 4 weeks plus 1 extra day, which means 29 days, to the calculation of any other year that's not Mu'peres. So therefore, each Chag will now fall 54 weeks and 5 days to the day right after the previous year, following the previous year. And that's because we added that 1 extra day to the 4 weeks of Chodesh Adar Sheni. So we're going to now postpone the Chag by 1 extra day. So according to the Acherim, El is always chaser. We would never be ma'aber El even with tzorach, and therefore Yom Kippurim could actually fall on a Sunday. And that sheet of the Acher is reflected, number one, in the Mishnah in Shabbos Kuf Yud Gimel and in the Bryce that we quoted earlier, which is also a Sugi in Shabbos on Kuf Yud Daled and Beis. Now, the Rabbanan disagree with Acherim, and they hold that God to the Machlokas, Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Shmuel, the Rabbanan say that Ma'aber Mesachodesh L'Tzorah. And therefore, there's no Seder Kavua to the days of the year. And it could be that between the Kviyas of one year, the Kviyas of the year afterwards, the following year, could be a much larger difference. And therefore, Yom Kippurim will always be on a day of Chol. And if they anticipate that would fall on Samach L'Shabbos, it's either Friday or Sunday, they would be Ma'aber Chodesh El, as we discussed, in order to avoid the Smichus, so as not to mess up the Yerukas or the Mason. And that's the svara of our Mishnah. Our Mishnah accepts the view of the Rabbanan. And Yom Kippurim could therefore never be chal, neither on a Sunday nor on a Friday. And Memela, Yom Tov Rishon Shel Sukkot would never fall on a Friday. It means that Erev Shabbos, the Tochach, will always have 48 tkiyos. Now, we had Rabbi Acha back on Daf Nun Daled Amud Aleph. Let's just quickly review Rabbi Acha. Rabbi Acha established, based on a drasha b'nei Aaron HaKohen Yisku b'chatzotsos, it's the word Yisku, to teach me that Hakol Lefi Hamusafim Token, which means that if there's an overlap of 2 Karbanos Musafim, then we will blow a Tkiyah for each one, a set of Tkiyahs for each one of these Musafim. So, for example, you have an overlap of Yontif and Shabbos, and therefore you have to bring the Karban Musaf of Shabbos plus the Karban Musaf of Yontif. Then there will be sets of 9 tkiyos for both the Musaf of Shabbos as well as the Musaf of Yontif. That was Rabbi Acha's opinion. They say, the Gemara now objects to Rabbi Acha that we have a separate tkiyah for each Musaf. Because of the following Bryce. Rosh Chodesh Echalnios b'Shabbos. Now we have an overlap of Rosh Chodesh and Shabbos. And we're going to bring a Karban Musaf of Rosh Chodesh, and in addition, the Karban Musaf of Shabbos. The Bryce establishes that Shir Shel Rosh Chodesh Docha, Shir Shel Musaf. We're not going to recite the Shir of Shabbos in addition to the Shir of Rosh Chodesh, but rather we'll recite only one Shir, and that's that of Rosh Chodesh. The so if you accept Rabbi Acha, that you have to be Tokea for each Musaf. And when is that Tkiyas B'Shas? Shir is Lema de Shabbos for Lema de Rosh Chodesh. We should be reciting the Shir of Shabbos in addition to the Shir of Rosh Chodesh. Because according to Rabbi Acha, that's the din on any day that has an overlap of 2 Musafim. So why are we being doche here in this price of the Shir of Shabbos? And it must be that they didn't sing the Shir of Shabbos and they didn't blow the tekios on that Shir on each one of the Musafim, but rather they gave priority to Rosh Chodesh. I'm going to explain why in a minute. And they would doche the Shir of Shabbos. Rav Safra says in defense of Rabbi Acha, that in truth they were sharing tokim on each one of them. My docha, what is the Brisa view? It says docha lekadem. In other words, you push off Shabbos. Not that they didn't sing the Shir of Shabbos, the Shir of Shabbos, and accompany it with the tekiyos. No, they did. But they pushed it off, meaning that in the sequence, they gave priority sequentially to the Shir of Rosh Chodesh, and we'll see why. So the Shir of Rosh Chodesh was sung first, before they sing the song of Shabbos, and the tekiyos were for each one of the Musafim, respectively, for each Shir. And therefore, we can interpret this brisa in a way that it's reconciled with the Shita of Rabbi Acha. The Gemara raises the following objection about why would they actually give Kedima in sequence priority to Rosh Chodesh? While it may be true that we bring the Karban Musaf of Rosh Chodesh to accompany with the Shir and the Tekiyos on, let's say, 18 days of Rosh Chodesh out of the year, but Shabbos is over 50 days out of the year, 52 days out of the year. So Shabbos is Tadir, and our principle is Tadir, Tadir Kodem. And therefore, since Shabbos is more Tadir, it's Tadira, more than Rosh Chodesh, therefore we should be maktiv the Shir of Shabbos. Rabbi Yochanan Leida Shehukva Rosh Chodesh Bismano. This is what we call Persume Nisa, so to speak. Not Nisa, but Persum Rosh Chodesh. It was a separate chiyuv to publicize Rosh Chodesh. People would know that it's definitely Rosh Chodesh. And Chazal looked for different methods, different means of publicizing Rosh Chodesh. For example, according to the Ravid Shita, we recite Hallel with a bracha on Rosh Chodesh, Lefarsamo Shehu Rosh Chodesh. Here we have another example. Oh yeah, I can mention Hachraza on the Shabbos before Rosh Chodesh. We make a public announcement in the shuls. This is all in order to be Mefarsem Shehu Rosh Chodesh. And Rabbi Yochanan applies that to this halacha of being makdim the Shir of Rosh Chodesh before the Shir of Shabbos in a case where there's an overlap of Shabbos and Rosh Chodesh. Everyone should understand and appreciate that Beis Din was Makadish the Chodesh Keil Chaso Bismano, and it's not a suffix. No one should be Magamgem Es Libo. No one should have second thoughts about it. It is Rosh Chodesh. So the Gemara right away asks, V'haya Kerav Dinon? We have a different Akir. We have a different method and means by which we're Mefarsem Rosh Chodesh. We have a Mishnah in the 8th parak of Shkolim. Chelbei Tomit Shel Shachar, Nitonim Mechatzi Kevesh Ulamata B'Mizrah. So we're talking about the Evarim of the Tomit Shel Shachar, which have to be placed on the Mizbeach for Haktorah. And there were two jobs of the Kohanim. There was one group of Kohanim that would win the rights to be molech the Evarim to the Kevesh. They would put the Evarim of the Karban Tamid on the lower half of the Kevesh, on the Mizrach side. And then the next Kohen would come and lift up the Evarim from the Kevesh and bring them onto the Mizbeach, maybe throw them onto the Mizbeach HaKtorah. And in order to create a simon that they should know that these are the Evarim of the Tamid, because we're talking about, let's say, for example, a Yontif or Shabbos, and there's also the Evarim of the Musafim. So we had to make sure that there was a separation. If we would put all the Avarim of both the Tamid Shel Shachar and of the Korban Musaf on the lower half of the Kevesh, on the Mizrach side, then we run the risk that the Kohanim might get mixed up between one set of Avarim and the other. So therefore, Shal Musafim Nitonim Chatzi Kevesh Ulamata Mitzal Ma'irav, although it was on the Lamata side of the Kevesh, but nevertheless, it was on the western side rather than the eastern side. And on the western side, that's Keneged Atom. Now, this was the Simon that these Avarim are part of the Karban Tamid because they were placed on the eastern side. And then on the western side, which is where the Avarim of the Musafim were placed, that's Keneged on the other side of the Tamid, straight across. And we're talking about a width of 16 amos. So as far as the length of the kevesh was 32 amos in length, and we could calculate based on the scope, but on the slope, because the kevesh was on a slope, we can calculate exactly where was the bottom half of the kevesh, how many amos was it from the ground, and then we have the width of the kevesh, which is 16 amos. And the Avarim of the Musafim, the Avarim of the Tamid, were placed on two sides of the width of the Kevesh, so that Lo Yachlifu, not to guarantee that there's no mistake, and they don't substitute or change the Avarim Musaf with the Avarim Tamid. And they might come in that case to be maktir the Musafim before the Tamid. And we have a halacha of Hashlam, that the Tamid has to be the last Karban of the day, the last Haktarah of the day. Bevarim shel Musaf shel Rosh Chodesh nitanim tachas karko, which is called the Sovev Hamizbeach Ulamat. So the Avarim of the Musaf Rosh Chodesh, because until now, so now we're talking about the Avarim of the Musaf Rosh Chodesh that were placed under the Karkov, which is the Sovev, where the Kohanim used to walk around the Mizbeach, Ulamata, and it was a little bit below the Sovev. And that's called the Chatzi Elyon Shel Kevesh. And that's the case of Avarim of the Musaf of Rosh Chodesh. Now, the Kevesh, as we said before, was 32 amos in length, and they had to reach a height to the top of the Mizbeach of Teisha amos. Umishefa v'Meshuba v'Ola ad legova Teisha amos. Legova Sheish amos. Once you climbed up to 6 amos to Mizbeach, Nimtza Sovev. That's where the Sovev was, from the ground 6 amos high. And therefore, after 2/3 of the orach of the kevesh mina oretz, right? Because 6 over 9 is 2/3. It reaches the gova of 6 amos, which is equal to the gova of the sovev. Underneath it a little is called chatzi kevesh ha'elyon, which is a little bit below the gova, the height of the sovev, which is 2 shlish, as we said before, was 6 amos high, and that's where they placed a vari musaf of Rosh Chodesh. And here we turn to Daf Nun Hey Amud Aleph. The Omar, Rabbi Yochanan, why did they place the Avarim of the Musaf Rosh Chodesh above the other Avarim? That is Leida Shehukba Rosh Chodesh Bisman. So again, if you were just separating the Avarim of the Musaf of Rosh Chodesh from other Karbanos, then it would be enough l'chora to put it on a separate place. Let's say it could be Lamato, but on the Mizrach side, etc., etc. But here they placed it Lamala, which is called in the Lashon of the Mishnah in Shkolim Achas Karko, immediately under the Karko, which we said was 6 amma, and now we're talking about 5.5 amma, let's say, but it's in the top half. And why do they need that? If they were simply interested in guaranteeing that there won't be any chilufim, God won't mistake these Avarim for those Avarim, they didn't have to put it on the top half of the Kevesh. They could have left it on the bottom half in a separate side, let's say on the Mizrach side. Says Rabbi Yochanan, there's an additional Hakera that we're interested in, and that's called Lodia Shehukva Rosh Chodesh Bisman. That everyone should understand that Bezdin had no suffix like Kivchach Chodesh. They were Makadesh Chodesh Kil Chasam Bismanim Anochon, and there won't be any Gimgul Lev Adam B'Pitom. So we see that they made a different Heker, to notify the people that Rosh Chodesh was established in its time. Why did they need the shear of Rosh Chodesh to come first and undermine the principle of Tadi V'Sheina Tadi Koden? The Gemara answers, Trei Hakera of Dina. Why would we make two different Hakera? One Heker with the Avarim Safim of Rosh Chodesh, that it would be Lamala B'Kevesh on the upper half of Kevesh, and to be Magdid the shear of Rosh Chodesh before the shear of Shabbos. Because it could be that some people would see one Heker and others would see the other Heker, but they wouldn't see the other Heker. And therefore, in order to have a guarantee that everyone would know, they did two Hekerim. And you might ask the question, why is it so important that the people know when Rosh Chodesh is, that there was a definite establishment of Rosh Chodesh? Let's just make 2 points here. First of all, Rosh Chodesh depends upon the Chidush HaLevana, which is not seen by the masses of people at the beginning of the month. The moon is very, very small. It's a sliver. And we needed Eidim to testify, but people weren't aware of the fact that it's already Rosh Chodesh. But secondly, I heard once from my Rebbe, Rav Soloveitchik, that is a mitzvah b'chodesh haseh yelachem Rosh Chodesh. And that obligation is incumbent upon everyone to be Mekadesh the Chodesh. We do it as a community, as a tzibur, and Bezdin will represent it. But it's not enough that the Bezdin will Mekadesh the Chodesh. We want to get all the people involved. They have to know and acknowledge that today is Rosh Chodesh, and then they participate in this mitzvah of Chodesh Zelachem Rosh Chodesh. And Rav Soloveitchik went even further. He said that even in our day, that we don't have a Bezdin, we still have, and we have Kiddush Cheshvan with the calendar. Nevertheless, we still have the mitzvah of being Makadesh the Chodesh. Lochem Rosh Chodesh now goes from Bezdin and falls back to the Tzibur, because Bezdin was only representing the Tzibur, and the Tzibur as such needs Hakera to make a public announcement that this day is Rosh Chodesh, and that's the mitzvah of Kiddush HaChodesh. And as we said earlier, there are many different methods and means for the people to be mefarsim and publicize and declare that today is. Okay, then, so this is where we're going to stop. Here on the top, Daf Nun Hey Omen Aleph, 3 lines down for the top, base.